All right, here we are, family. Welcome to another stream podcast. I'm Kevin Orris, your host. This will go out on the revolution. And today I'm joined by an amazing philosopher, author. He's a men's worker, a mentor, and a radical philosopher, I would say, who's quite controversial, but also hyper intelligent and wise, Mr. Alexander Bard. So grateful to be here with you.
Thank you so much for having me. And we are probably right now the two men with the biggest microphones in the world. So we're certainly very phallic today. We go into this
Right. The
chat
twin
mode.
phalli, right?
Yeah, exactly. The biggest sticks on StreamYard. Here we are.
Off to a great start. So, Alexander, I know that you were involved in the intellectual deep web community. I met you at the European Men's Gathering. Shout out to Manifesto and those gentlemen, and also Cadell and Daniel, my co-authors. You and Cadell are now writing a book. You've written multiple books, and you've been super deep in the intersection of, I would say, religiosity, mythology, men's work, and Tantra and sexuality and all the things that are intersecting there. And I'd love to hear a little bit about, the abridged history of Bard, the origin story.
Yeah, great. And I think you and I share a great love of Eastern philosophy, and we just want to take the Eastern philosophy to the West. We also want to reinterpret it in a more Western context, and of course that's what we're working with all the time. It's an amazing challenge, but it's incredibly rewarding.
That's right. So you were born in South Africa.
Yeah, kind of. My family were a bunch of vagabonds. They traveled all over the world. So we finally ended up in Scandinavia for various reasons. Some of them were political, some of them were religious, and were also cultural, right? Scandinavia is like the most peaceful part of the planet. I mean, 5 highly civilized countries, the lowest possible corruption rate you could think of. They're kind of advanced liberal democracies. I think the welfare states are a little bit too big for my taste, but these countries work. Like, they're very civilized and they work. What's fascinating also is that Scandinavia is becoming part of what I call Anglo-Europe. We used to speak German and French as second languages before in Scandinavia, but after 1945, English started dominating. And of course, with America being the dominant power in the world, the English becomes the second language, right? So Scandinavians were probably some of the few people who adopted what I call the Quebec position. Like if you're Quebecois Canadian, like you love to have your own language to speak at home, which is French, but you can speak the best possible English at any given time. And it's a bit like Scandinavia today. For some of your viewers, obviously, who are English speaking, and certainly a lot of them are Americans. So Scandinavia is a place you can go where anybody will speak English to you. As soon as you enter the room, they will turn over to English. They will only speak Swedish when there are only Swedes in the room. And the same thing goes for Finland, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland. So this is really Anglo-Europe. If you want to go somewhere in Europe where people are very comfortable speaking the English language as a second language, it will be Holland or Scandinavia.
Okay. Good to know for those that want to travel to those Nordic lands. I'm excited to go there myself. And so, Bard, you had a history as a rock star. You were the vocalist in a pop group. We want to talk about that.
Yeah, I'd say that if you're lucky, and I've been very lucky, very fortunate in my life. I had great parents, great upbringing, and some luck, along the way, and great mentors. But if you're lucky, you get to develop what I call 2 archetypes during your lifetime. I always tell guys in men's work, and this goes for women too, that what you should look for is your primary archetype, meaning your personality. Like what's your profession here, or what do you contribute to life, or where do you excel the best, in life? And that's your primary archetype. But there's also often a secondary archetype. Like when you go to college in America, you do a major and a minor, which I think is a great way of prioritizing what you're going to study. Your major is probably where you put your profession, or it's simply where you're at your most shining best. I always say that your primary archetype is probably the sort of things you do with ease, but that still impress other people around you. So for you, it's like the easiest thing in the world to do. And other people go, wow, how'd you do that? And it's just like, well, that's just me. I do that all the time. That's your primary archetype. The secondary archetype is the one we have to make more of an effort. But if somebody needs to do it, you could do it. So it's probably something you work hard towards achieving, but you're really the guy who could do it in case somebody needs to, right? So I was lucky. I didn't know at the time when I was in my 20s and I became a musician and had a successful career in the music industry. First as a rock star, I played in 4 different bands. I toured the world. I sold millions of records. Then I started producing other artists. Was even more successful as a songwriter and a producer. And eventually I also run record companies and music publishing companies. And 8 years ago I resigned. I'd done everything. I even did Swedish Idol as a juror, which is like the last thing you do. It's just like payback time. Okay, I'll sit on television and basically tell people if they have talent or not, because that's like the last thing you would do, right? So I did it all. I closed the door 8 years ago, and it turned out it was my secondary archetype to be a musician and a rock star, because my primary archetype is to think and to write. And I was always interested in that, but you can't do that well when you're 20. You don't know that much. You're not that educated yet. Your ego is still a bit too big when you're 20. So I was in my late 30s when I made my debut as a philosopher. My first book came out when I was 39 years old. I'm now writing my sixth and my seventh book simultaneously. And 8 years ago, I was at an age where I realized that, staying in the music industry requires a lot of hard work. I don't want to be mediocre. Becoming a really great philosopher require even more work, and I don't want to stay in that and be mediocre. And I decided I had 25 years in the music industry. Great, I'll close that door, live off the royalties the rest of my life. I have fuck off money, I'm fine. And after that, I could pursue becoming a philosopher full time. And since then, I've written 3 more books, and I'm working on another 2 at the moment. And I love it. I love it. I mean, philosophy is an art form. Music was an art form. I am certainly an artist, but my primary archetype here as an artist also is to become a philosopher.
Beautiful. I mean, I love this idea that we have these two archetypes, and often maybe some people are developing their secondary because that's what society conditioned them to, but their primary gets discovered later. And I think that's a
You know
beautiful
what,
part of
Kevin? It's great you addressed that, because a lot of guys these days tend to think that the primary archetype, that which they do with these, has no value to them. They think
it.
they cannot have an archetype. They cannot pursue their personality and discover themselves unless they make much of an effort. That is actually dead wrong. It's not you who decide what your archetype is. It's not your effort that decides your archetype. It's other people. It's your brothers, your sisters, the people around you, your community. It's what you contribute to the community that gives some meaning to life. And we're going to talk about tantric sex later, you and I. It's giving the woman pleasure. It's the biggest pleasure of all. It's meaning something to other people. That is the most human aspect of who you are. And that's why I teach a lot of these guys. You know what? If you spend a lot of time working on something, it probably is your secondary archetype, especially if you made a career. But you have hidden your primary archetype. It could be lover. That could be a primary archetype.
Sure.
Where you excel the most, where you contribute the most, where you give other people the most enjoyment, the most pleasure in life. That's your primary archetype. And we should stress this, that a lot of people getting involved in our conversation here, when you try to find your archetype, ask other people, reflect yourself in your relations with other men and women. That's how you discover your archetype. And it's precisely that, where you never had to make an effort, which just came naturally to you, which you love doing in the morning every day. That's your primary archetype.
Yeah, this is brilliant. And for those listening, if you have trouble finding out what this is, ask the 5 people closest to you, your partner, your brothers, your sisters, your colleagues, because they'll be able to recognize it immediately. Because it's like a fish in water. It's like you ask the fish, what's water? And it's like you're just inside of it, swimming it, embodying it. So this is a really important concept. And obviously the dream in terms of being an entrepreneur, being in the academy or in corporate, is to monetize and actually link that value up to economics, so your primary archetype, because that's when you're in the lucrative, easy, fun, sexy stage of just crushing it and getting paid to do what you're actually best at, which I say is quite rare these days.
Yeah, and don't ever allow shame or guilt to drive you. If you go to the gym because you feel shameful or guilty about something, it's not going to work. It
Right.
can work for a few weeks, but if you're not excited about going to the gym, if you're not excited about making your body feel great, if you're not excited about getting a better pulse, eating the right things in life, you're not excited about those things, you must go back and remove the shame and the guilt. That's part of tantric work. Like, you remove the shame and the guilt. They're terrible driving forces.
Right.
Let your lust come through. Let your lust for life, your libido, come through. Let your libido drive you, right? No shame, no guilt. That's a good place to start.
That's beautiful. It's like using like shitty fuel. It's like unprocessed coal when you could be using like, a nuclear reactor of your real libido instead of a false fuel. It's a beautiful metaphor. So Bard, where do you get into let's call it broadly, Eastern philosophies. We'll call it Tantra, which Tantra is a type of technology or it's a way of living. There's multiple ways we can look at Tantra. And when did this enter your work? Was this something you were already deeply connected to as a musician in that industry, or did it come later when you started to own philosopher?
Well, there was a point maybe when you were a musician in America and you learned everything about country and Western, and then you became a musician. Now you have to learn everything about music. You have to learn about music from all over the world before you become a musician, because otherwise it gets embarrassing, right? Some of the best hip hop stars in the world today are Nigerian. They're not American any longer. I mean, music can come from anywhere. It was the same thing with philosophy. I realized when I started working on it intensely in the 1980s that I was probably the first generation that couldn't start with the Greeks. We couldn't
Mm,
start quoting the Greeks again. That'd be embarrassing. Philosophy is thousands of years older than whatever the Greeks came up with. And it started in Asia, it started in India. India has the superpower of philosophy. Iran, China, Japan, Egypt, Babylon, Mesopotamia, they all did philosophy long before the Greeks. What the Greeks did well was that they summarized a lot of the thinking that had been going on for a long time. And they borrowed it from other cultures. And the Greeks are also lucky in that their texts were kept. If you
right.
study, for example, Persia, that I've studied Persian thinking intensely, I'm fascinated with it. But the Mongol invasion of the 13th century destroyed almost every library in Persia,
Mm,
and most of the heritage was suddenly just gone. Almost all of the pre-Islamic Persia was gone. Only fragments were left, and that's why it's like archaeological work to try to understand Persian philosophy fully and go back, say, 4,000 years, something like I do in my work. It's hard archaeological work because of that. The Greeks, they were kept, saved by the Arabs, we should stress, because in Europe with Christianity we probably burned most of the Greeks' books, but the Arabs actually saved the Greeks for us. And finally, during the Renaissance, when a lot of the Arabs sent a lot of the Greek texts to Europe, Plato, Aristotle, all these guys came back with a vengeance. And then they laid the foundation for what we call the Enlightenment in the
mhm,
17th century, which was, of course, enhanced by the printing press because books were now affordable. You could print them in large numbers, distribute them to many people. People learned how to read and write all over Europe, and that became the Enlightenment. And of
mm,
course, then after that, especially in the 19th century, we constructed the idea that the West started with Europe, and Europe started with the Greeks, right? Well, if you go back to, ancient times, it turns out the Greeks considered themselves to be the only civilized people at the very north, and north of them would only be barbarians.
right.
But the Greeks were like envious of their Egyptian and Persian and Babylonian and Mesopotamian brothers because they'd done philosophy long before the Greeks had.
Right.
And now, if you study Greek philosophy, it turns out that several of the major characters, like Pythagoras and Heraclitus, were not even Greek.
Right.
They were Kurdish or Persian or something else, right? So when I did that, I realized I got to go to the East. I got to go to the East. I got to understand all of philosophy. I got to understand whatever civilization is. I got to understand why people have always written and commented and thought thoroughly about what they do as they created civilization.
Hmm.
Philosophy and civilization are like they're in parallel all the time. So I wanted to go to the very foundation for that, and therefore I traveled a lot in the East, and eventually in the 1990s also decided to convert. And I could either specialize on Indian philosophy, in which case I'd probably become a Buddhist. I could
Mm,
specialize in Chinese philosophy and probably convert to Taoism. But my specialty became Persian philosophy because it connected the other two. It was also the most underrated, and therefore I
mhm,
converted to Zoroastrianism in 1992. And
right.
later I discovered that all these three religions, they're now called the Silk Route Triad, because along the Silk Route, people didn't care if you were Taoist or Buddhist or Zoroastrian. It was all the same thing. You would
Mm,
go into an oasis, you would go to the hospice, you would get a meal at the restaurant, you would go to bathhouse and clean yourself, you go to the gym and work out. They were called sarkanas. Gyms were invented by Persians 4,000 years ago.
mhm.
There you go. Right?
Amazing.
And probably you go to whorehouse, and that's where you did the big deals.
Right.
Whorehouse were not so much about tantric sex at the time. They were probably more about deal making, and they were nightclubs, essentially. That's what we call them today. But before you left the Oasis, you'd go to what was called the Kostok, which is the precursor to our monasteries today. You'd go somewhere to clean your soul. You
Mm,
go somewhere to contemplate, to get the bullshit out of the way, to get all the bad deals out of your head, to think more positively, creatively, constructively about yourself in the future. So you could go into the next oasis and do good deals again and do good things. And
mhm,
that's essentially religion for me. Religious spirituality is all about cleansing your soul every day, getting back on track, fixing your life, and set your mind on something higher and more noble ahead of you, which you can reach for, right? And that is what you did at the Cossacks along the Silk Route. That's my religion. That's what I think religion is. I think history is all about the trade routes. It's all about communication. It's all about cultures meeting with each other, fusions between cultures.
Right.
Yeah, I'm big on that, right? So that's to me what religious spirituality is and should be. And when I converted, I discovered that, oh, okay, so there was a Persian Tantra. There wasn't just the Chinese or the Indian Tantra, there was also a Persian Tantra. And then I started to really study Tantric philosophy. I discovered, of course, sexology, Tantric sex.
Mm-hmm.
There's also pharmacology, when you do psychedelic experiences.
Right.
That's a tantric practice, right?
Yeah.
So you need to understand what you're doing. You need to be guided by somebody who's more experienced than you. It's a skill. It takes years to learn. If you learn it, you'll be magnificent at it, but it requires intention. It requires the actual act, the ceremony, and it requires certain integration, right? So
Right.
I learned that Persian Tantra wasn't that different from the Chinese or the Indian Tantra. It was just basically maybe the landscape of Persia was different than India and China. That was the only major difference.
Sure. Well, and something different about the tantric lifestyle and philosophy and practices are that it's very much in the body, in the world, and confronting reality. So some of these other traditions have tried to go out of reality, right? So we want to go transcendental or platonic, and we want to go just into these super spaces that actually deny some of the physical. And being raised Catholic, of course, I found that to be very lacking and just not satisfying at all. And so for me,
Yeah,
the path
I
wasn't
agree.
yoga.
I'm not a big fan of Christianity or Islam, and this is a simple reason. Um, Although I do a lot of Sufi practices, but that's because Sufism is pre-Islamic, to be honest. But
Mm,
what I found so disturbing was that about 800 before Christ, we ran into a period called the Axial Age historically. The entire Eurasian mass continent, like Asia, even Northern Africa, Europe, were very prosperous at the time. They were, we would say, they were making money, we would say today, but they were making tons of food, to be honest, at the time. And suddenly there was an affluence we'd never seen before in history. The problem was that the affluence afforded people to have all kinds of crazy ideas. It's often seen as a golden age because it was very productive. But philosophically speaking, I'm very skeptical of the Axial Age. I think it was during the Bronze Age before that the really great ideas were actually tried out. But
mm,
what happened during the Axial Age was a lot of people suddenly realized that, well, I'm not really competing on the body level. Like I'm not sexually attractive or sexually comfortable. So I'm going to regard sex as problematic and as a negative thing in my life. So I'm going to go all spiritual and denying my body,
mhm,
denying my sexuality, right? And that's Gnosticism for me. It starts about 800 before Christ and explodes later. The problem is also there's also an inverted form of Gnosticism. The inverted form of Gnosticism in my work I call the boy pharaoh, like the
mhm,
boy pharaoh of Egypt. Like you're 11 years old, you trust your body and your physical, but you don't trust your mind. And you don't excel when it comes to the mind, right? But you
mhm,
want to be powerful. Maybe you inherit an entire kingdom. So you want to go to war at all times, and then you want to build a big fucking pyramid after you're dead, so that everybody will respect you after you're dead, right? But you're mindless, you're senseless in your approach towards life. Both these two things to me are wrong. I mean, the
mhm.
mind should be embodied at all times.
Right.
That's why I'm holistic. I'm a strict monist. Everything in the world is connected with everything else. That's what I learned from Eastern philosophy.
Mhm.
That's what Persian and Chinese and Indian philosophy in common. They're all monist philosophies. They regard dualism as a terrible mistake the West went ahead with, but they're not. They're monist. Right? And if you're monist, your mind must be embodied, but your body must also be minded. You
Mhm.
must be mindful about your body and what it does, etc. And once you learn to play with these things and accept your body as it is, accept your mind as it is, contribute the best way you possibly can. Some of us are better at mind, some of us are better at body. You can have a mind-related archetype, you can have a body-related archetype. But the important thing is that the community is held together. That's why I teach guys that if your mind is where you excel the most, get a friend who you admire who's good at the body and
Right.
allow him to admire you for being great at mind. And then you created the perfect duo to go out and conquer the world because you are embodied and minded together. I
Yeah.
find this absolutely essential to any true spirituality.
Totally. Well, and we have to include that sexuality or the pathos. And that's what that's what, for me, my entry into Tantra was through Qigong and Tai Chi. And I found Mantak Chia and I was like, what is this? This is dope. And then through yoga and through Patanjali and the Yoga Sutras. But then I got into the Hatha Yoga Tantra vein and followed that upstream. And what they do is they include, and they don't talk about it as much. I mean, they talk about soma in the Vedas, but very tantric ways of being, which in the West we would call witchcraft, which is the use of psychedelic plants, the use of sexual practices and techniques to sublimate and increase consciousness and perform healing and intimacy and connection. And these practices, it seemed like in the East, were very at the forefront. Whereas in Christianity, what you're talking about with the dualism, with the denying of the body, the repression of sexuality, which we see now downstream in our modern world with porn addiction and just domestic violence and divorce rates. I mean, I feel like the West is getting the bill now from those hundreds of years of going down this route that clearly has not served humanity. And so I think that's why we see Tantra and intimacy coaching and embodiment and things like sexology making a sort of a renaissance now.
Absolutely. This is what I call the Silk Road Triad. You're with me totally on this. I mean, you just quoted, you learned your practice through Taoism and Buddhism. The third one is Zoroastrianism, but it's basically the same type of schools, right? They do all these things you just mentioned. That's what's important to learn. If you don't learn those things, you can't be in that realm at all. And what happened was that starting with Egyptians and later inherited by Christianity and Islam is the idea of the afterlife. Okay, so when you die, you go somewhere else. With that idea comes also the next idea, which is that the afterlife is much better than this. This is pain and suffering. But once, if you do the right thing, if you don't commit sin, or if your sins are forgiven, at least, you get a chance to go to heaven. You get a chance to go to another life. And the exploitation of the planet, the destruction of the planet is part of this. It's just like, okay, but we might as well destroy the planet because there's going to be a new Jerusalem. There's going to be a new world. The heaven is going to arrive and Jesus will come back or Muhammad will come back and they'll take us to the next heaven. And once we come to the afterlife, we don't have to take responsibility for anything we do here. We're just victims of oppression and suffering. And we don't need to do anything about it. We just need to wait for our Savior to come along and take us there. It's this idea of the afterlife that makes you so irresponsible here and now. That is completely unacceptable in Buddhism or Taoism or Zoroastrianism. These religions, the Silk Road religions, they're very adamant that no, life is about here and now. It's about presence here and now. It's about being embodied in your thinking. It's about being minded in your actions. It's about understanding, like we say in Persia, that what you think will affect how you speak, and how you speak will affect how you act. And how you act today will affect how you dream tonight and will affect how you think tomorrow. So you're in this feedback loop all the time where you're thinking and you're speaking and you're acting is reflecting back on you. It's becoming you in the process, but it's also who you are in relation to other people. And once you start considering that, you live in a community where people are more aware of that, hey, takes off in a whole new direction if you skip these ideas like the afterlife. Right. No, be present here and now. Okay, some Eastern thinking is about reincarnation.
Sure.
That everything returns to the same. So therefore, everything also is reborn some way. Although I would say that I don't find any serious practitioners of Eastern thinking to say that you consciously reincarnate and becomes another life. That's a bit of, Western New Age. That's not something that a serious Buddhist or Taoist would pursue. In Zoroastrianism, we rather focus on to be lucky enough to live a full life, a whole life, is to reach something called Harvatat in ancient Persian. Harvatat is like, I reached a full life. I was lucky. I'm old. I've lived a full, I've done everything. I've ticked all the boxes. I was lucky, right? God, what a great life I've lived. But I've done everything. And from now on, everything would only be repetition. And by the way, I'm old and my friends are dying and pain, my legs are achy. I could leave at any moment now. I was lucky. I had a full life. That's called Harvatat. And what transcends you, the Amiritat, which is the equivalent of immortality, is what you leave behind. What you leave for your children to take over, for your next generation to take over. And you can tell the difference here because in Egypt, they built big pyramids, right, for wealthy people when they died. They spent their entire fucking national budget and finally the Egyptian empire fell apart because they went bankrupt building pyramids. Right? Could easily happen in America today, right? So, but the Persians did the opposite thing. When you died, they took the corpse and threw it out in nature. Gave back to nature. They gave it to animals to eat. It's just a corpse. but they would celebrate the day you die for the next 70 years every year, because the memory of you and you having lived a full life meant everything to the next generation. So
Hmm.
the next generation could look to you as a role model after you died, and every year be reminded of what a great person we had in the family, how lucky this person was, how hard this person worked, how much this person contributed to the community. So instead of having, say, saints or some lesser gods, you basically had the last generation who died, and you would go and visit them if you wanted on a regular basis, visit their spirit. But the Polgasaurus, it's called, was celebrated every year for 70 years. And it's so striking when you travel through Egypt and see all the pyramids along the Nile. They're quite impressive. And then you go to ancient Persia and you don't see a single sign of a grave anywhere, because
Mm,
the corpse is just a corpse. But
mm.
a life is a life, and that's amazing. And that's much closer to Buddhism and Taoism. That's much closer to the embodied version of spirituality that you and I promote.
Right, right. This is brilliant. I think some people are getting a history lesson right now if you're watching or listening, which is that's one of the things I love about you, Bart, is that you followed one of these underrated pathways that people forgot, which was the Persian Empire and the beauty and elegance that they were embodying along this Silk Road um, pathway. Which is funny as you speak. I'm like, what is the Silk Road now? And of course, it's the internet, and I think
Yeah,
blockchain is one of the front lines of that. Because how where are we getting the trade routes? I mean, I'm here in Austin, which is becoming like a new Silicon Valley. Like Elon Musk is here, Joe Rogan. There's like a huge nexus forming here. But if you go 10 miles in any direction, you're in small town Texas, America, who are completely isolated from a lot of these other things, except for these devices. And then suddenly they have a Silk Road feed of radical amounts of information coming to them through their screens, which obviously
absolutely.
we're doing as
This
well.
this is why learning the history of the Silk Road is key, both to spirituality today and also to understanding where we're at now historically. And one of the things I'm thrilled about, I started working with this like 30 years ago. For example, in America, you have a large Iranian diaspora in America. You have a
Mhm.
large Indian diaspora in America. You got a large Chinese diaspora in America. You got a lot of kids with Chinese, Indian, Iranian backgrounds in America today, and they're rediscovering the roots, and they're thrilled about this kind of work. They're relearning the old languages. They go dig into history. They do, of course, the archaeology. They also do data anthropology. You've never been able to do that before, but if you can collect data about the historical past, then you can create patterns and see how people lived and how they moved and how they thought and what they practiced in a way you've never been able to do before. We're going to see a fantastic revolution over the next 30 years,
Mm,
which is a complete rewriting of Asian history. And
mm,
central to the rewriting of Asian history is going to be a much deeper, more profound understanding of Eastern philosophy. And I warmly welcome it. I think a lot of the interpretations of Eastern philosophy so far have been sort of very commercial and superficial,
sure.
but the really deep understanding of Eastern wisdom, we're only just the beginning of it, and we have a lot of Easterners who are now connected with the West, connected through
Mhm.
digital, that will help us pursue this. So it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I was thinking of Osho talking about the whole man and the coming humanity, where he's like, Eastern man is half, Western man is half. One prioritized, some of these deeper traditions of awareness and the inner technologies of consciousness. The other prioritized the outer technologies, and they each had benefits, right? The West became hyper militaristic, technologically profitable. The East, in China, well, China is definitely cranking along, but in India and Persia now it's looking quite different because of the geopolitics. But when those things start to merge, and I think you're correct, these immigrant generations. I mean, who's running so much of Silicon Valley in tech, and like what's driving innovation? There's a
Yeah.
ton of
I
immigrant
you you
children
you
there.
you can go to city states like Dubai and Singapore and Hong Kong. They're shining examples of these cultures and what potentially could happen to much larger extent in China and India and Persia as well. But I would say that the fact that these are like world beaters now in the economy and the innovation and with everything like that, and also they're also rediscovering their own spirituality, their own spiritual traditions, I think it's fantastic. But of course, we do have things to contribute from the West to the East. And that's not
Right.
just how you create a massively wealthy society and run a liberal democracy and things like that.
Mm,
You know, we have Ukraine versus Russia at the moment. Well, it is a Western internal conflict, but it's really the conflict between liberal democracy and the Enlightenment versus a very feudal idea, which is a czar of Russia who's a dictator. that not even the Russian people want any longer, right? So we have clearly there what I call a paradigmatic shift. It's like the completion of the European miracle is going to be Ukraine versus Russia, and I certainly hope Ukraine will win and establish that liberal democracy is worth living and dying for, right? And that's the Western contribution to world history.
Mm-hmm.
That's an amazing contribution. I love Hegel, for example. I think Hegel has some real original thinking I never found in the East. But overall, when it comes to the larger picture, when it comes to how you connect philosophy and spirituality and religion, and how you implement, philosophical insight into your everyday life, like you do with tantric practices, the East is totally superior.
Right.
That's where all these traditions have been for a long time. And every time I work in India, I'm always reminded by the Indians. Yeah, Bart, you're a smart guy from Scandinavia. There isn't a single thought in history that an Indian hadn't thought already.
Sure.
Because India is what the world is becoming. India has always been a huge place full of people, very interconnected with one another, that try to communicate with each other and stay peaceful as long as they possibly could. Of course, there's also downsides to that. Osho is now becoming popular in India, finally, because I think Osho was much more a prophet for India than it was a prophet for us in the West. He took what was best from the West, took it to India, saw India through new glasses, and of course discovered that he hated the caste system because it tied people to things they shouldn't do at all. It didn't tie them to their archetypes. It tied them to old archetypes they were stuck with, rather than trying to find your own personal archetype.
Right.
And Osho was adamant about this. It wasn't until India had woken up and accepted modernity that he saw India also being able to make the jump that Osho promoted. That's why Osho was a fantastic Indian thinker for India.
Right.
And he's finally now being discovered. And a lot of Indians I talked to said that, hey, that Osho guy, there were a lot of weird cults around that guy, but hey, the thinking is absolutely
Top
first
tier. Top tier.
Absolutely top.
As a bridger of the worlds, I don't know if there's anyone. I mean, I'm super biased because I studied with sannyasins. I did a lot of that style of meditation, so I'm super biased. And he bridged it in a way. Well, I mean, Alan Watts did it from the San Francisco side, where he went down into Zen and he formed some of those bridges that then people followed. And this is the culmination of what was happening in the 50s and 60s, and then what accelerated with psychedelia coming in. That's kind of that north-south trade route. So we have the Amazon where all these plants are, and then Mexico where there's these mushroom cults, and then that north-south transition of like, wow, there's stuff in the earth that literally enables consciousness to heal, grow, and regulate at a high level.
It just happened that those plants grew in totally different superpowers than the military ones.
Right.
The three superpowers of potent psychedelic plants are Peru, Mexico, and Central Asia. Right? In Central Asia, that's where the original soba comes from. The original tantric practice, which was Persian, is called hauma, and it included incredibly potent psychedelic plants that, of course, were never found in India, because India and Europe and Africa are they're very short on these resources. Right? It's usually cannabis grows just about everywhere, and so do mushrooms, but that's about it, right? But if you come to Central Asia, especially during antiquity, they had so many incredibly potent plants. So if you're going to do tantric pharmacology, which I'm a big proponent of, then you got to understand, you need to go to Afghanistan, you need to go to Central Asia, you need to go to Tajikistan and actually find out what those cultures were like and where those plants came from. But you're also lucky if you're in Austin, Texas, because you're actually on the right continent when it comes to psychedelic superpowers. Because, hey, God decided to put most of those plants in Peru and Mexico. And the discovery of the potential of the psychedelic plants in Peru and Mexico has only just started. There are thousands of potent plants. There are potentially millions of different combinations that could have the most fantastic healing effects on people. And we only just started to explore that. You only started.
Well, in the same way that sexuality was repressed by Christianity, you can imagine like a Christian missionary talking to some sadhu who's, with a dakini, sublimating, super consciousness through a tantric sex, and how like anathema that was. Like that just shattered these ideas about sin. In the same way, in US regulation, it's slowly moving. I know places in Europe are a little more ahead with decriminalizing these plants. But the idea that plants would be illegal, and the idea that consciousness inducing plants would be illegal, is an absurd, and our forebears will look back, our children, and will just say, man, they thought they were so high tech with their iPhones, but they were cavemen in consciousness.
Exactly. And that is the problem with Christianity and Islam. And I told you I'm critical of those two religions because they way they handle these things is that they went completely sutric and did not allow a tantra. Going sutric means that you
Mhm.
ban it.
Right.
So it's dangerous. We just ban it. Nobody's allowed to touch it. It's just evil. It's a sin to even think about it, right?
Sure.
You can't do that with nature. Whatever nature provides for us, it's probably a pharmacon. And if you look at pharmacon, meaning that if you do it the wrong way, it's going to be destructive. If you do it the right way, it can have fantastic potential. But by looking at anything that comes out of nature as a pharmacon to begin with and have sort of the right approach to it, which is the proper tantric approach to anything you encounter in life, you don't ban anything. It's just a matter of who does what
Right.
dose, when, why, and
Right.
the intention prior to doing anything and the integration afterwards
Both
decides
important.
everything.
Yeah.
Decides everything. And genuine spirituality has always those three elements. It has what I call a virtual, a potential, and an actual. It has, first of all, the intention. It has then the ceremony, the act itself. Then it has the integration. And the more you work with spirituality, the more fascinating the integration gets. And
Hmm.
finally, you work with some of these shamans have been doing the ayahuasca for, say, 40 years and just like, yeah, we drink it, tastes like shit. You know what?
Mhm.
It's the day after. It's all about the day after. That's
Right.
when all the miracles happen. That's when couples get
Yeah.
together again. That's when children and their parents get to love each other again. And that's when depressions are suddenly gone and people can live without a depression. All the shit that comes out of it, all the good shit that comes out of it, is always about the integration. And that I think we should stress constantly when we started talking about tantric spirituality, is that it's all about the integration. Another thing I want to mention here is that when it comes to these things, whenever people ban it, say you must not even go there, that means they have a problem with it themselves,
Sure.
right? And you and I do men's work together, and one of the principles we work with, we just tell the guys, and they go, say 200 guys go into the room. It's the first evening. They're going to be a long weekend, do men's work. And one of the first things we say is usually, never trust a brother who doesn't have a sex life in order.
Mm.
And they start looking around and they realize how eerie that comment is. Because a guy who doesn't have a sex life in order will be obsessed with the sex life. And I
That's
mean
right.
obsessed in a negative way. He'll be obsessed with the sex life, meaning he will only see other men as rivals
Right.
towards something he doesn't even have and will never have. It's getting your sex life in order mean embracing, accepting yourself, your sexuality, confronting it head on, and say that whatever my sexuality is, it's a beast. I'm gonna go into battle with, and I'm gonna understand it, and I'm gonna embrace it, and I'm gonna include it, and I'm gonna be completely enhanced by it, and it's gonna be part of me. So that
Right.
I can meet, for example, if I'm a man, heterosexual man, I meet another guy, my sexuality is put on the side. It's not about the relationship with my brother at all. And at the end of the day, if we happen to sleep with the same woman the same night and enjoy it together and do high five, wow, but that'd be fantastic. But it's not necessary at all because he's not a rival.
Right.
Another
This is
man is not a
huge.
rival. That's the point. Because I worked on and I fixed my sex life. That
Mm.
I think is the foundation for doing tantric work. And it's the same thing with doing tantric work when it comes to psychedelic drugs, for example. The
Sure.
first thing you must ask yourself is that have you got your mind in order?
Right.
Are you fine with just being, waking up on a Monday, having a sober Monday? Is that okay with you? Or are you trying to escape something you haven't dealt with? Because then you need to deal with that first.
Yeah.
You need to know where your shadow is. If you don't know where your shadow is before you go into psychedelics, you're done. If you know where your shadow is at, you located it, you started working on it, then a shaman can guide you and say, okay, let's go down this journey because this is what you need. This will
Mm.
do you good. I know from experience. I've seen it happen before. So this will do you good. And then you go down that road and you integrate it with some friends, you integrate it with the shamans, and etc. And you can start working your way through your shadow.
Yeah.
And suddenly you are aware of your shadow. You've done your shadow work. And you can't do psychedelics if you don't do your shadow work properly first. Same thing there.
Right.
Watch out for guys who walk around with shadows.
Yeah.
Watch out for the guys who walk around with rivalries. They might smile at you, but if you notice that, this guy doesn't have his shit in order, stay away.
Yeah. This is huge. I mean, relationship to God, relationship to food, especially magical food, psychedelic food, and sexuality are at the core of everything. And I see this when I coach clients. Like I've worked with millionaires and people at the top of their industry. And what does it all boil down to? It's like all the tactical, strategic stuff is great, cool. I love to geek out with it. It's like moving the Lego pieces around. What's at the core? Well, me and my wife aren't having fully embodied, deeply orgasmic sex, or I don't feel super connected, et cetera, et cetera. That's the core of everything. And what you're saying, especially in men's work, this is in at the European men's movement. I saw this when I was working in the American men's work. The first day, every man's sizing each other up. And when there's no females in the room, the brothers that, like you're saying, don't have their sex life in order, well, it's just sitting there on the shoulder. And then that's the first thing they want to talk about. That's the first thing they want to fight about or process. And this is the deep work. Is a lot of men, their sexual education came from porn, came from Hollywood, and came from absolute bullshit role models, because we lost a lot of those ritual elders and mentors of an older man coming up and being like, hey, let's talk about this, or like, let's confront this together. And I'm going to confront you on the fact that you are out of integrity with the feminine inside yourself first, and then with the external.
I call it sexual nihilism.
Mm.
It's when you think sexuality is something just to be worn down,
Wow.
something to get rid of, something to come out of your body, to not have to think about it.
Mm.
And of course, a lot of the addictive behavior. Say, I don't mind pornography. I think pornographic actors are some of the most generous people I've ever met. I think exhibitionism is a fantastic, beautiful thing to give to voyeurs who love to see other people fuck. Right? I don't have a
Sure.
problem with that at all. It's deeply spiritual. But when it comes to the sort of commercialized mass pornography we have today, that just wears you down, where even the pornographic actors look bored when they're
Right.
on camera. Like, can I just have this over and done with and get my paycheck and leave? That has nothing to do with the beauty of exhibitionism.
Sure.
That is just pure cynical nihilism and nothing else. And if that's all you know, if you're a young guy today and that's all you know, you have understand sexuality is completely off. It's just like you are a sexual nihilist. And I think to not understand the beauty and the fantastic potential of and the richness of sexuality. I mean, hey, you got to start working on that.
Like not even living.
Whatever else you do in your life is a waste of time. If sexuality is the ultimate reward in your reward system for all the hard work you do in the other departments of your life, like the end goal of any archetype is sexual pleasure at the end of the day, or sexual enjoyment. And if you don't get that, why don't you start right there? Because you got to go there anyway.
Mm.
And being relaxed and accepting about your bodies is the number one rule there. This goes for women in a different way. For women, it is the denial of female sexuality that I find so deeply tragic in our culture. The fact that a female body can have 7 different types of orgasms. Its potential is huge. Right? The female body is the atomic bomb of sexuality, right?
Oh yeah, it's
And
nuclear.
women don't know that. When women think that the 3-minute sex is the only sex they're ever going to have, just to get
Dear
the guy
Lord.
pleased and get it over and done with, they are completely sexual nihilists. That's a female version of sexual nihilism. And to have women understand the enormous sexual potential of their body, the pleasure, the treasures that reside in there, that can be let out, and embraced. I mean, it's fantastic to see the journeys women go through that and finally understand what they're sitting on, what the fantastic potential they have. And it's their reward system. Their reward system is all about turning off the testosterone at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, babbling off a bed about the day and having a glass of wine or something, or hanging out little kiddling, with the kids. And then by 6, 7 in the evening, when the estrogen starts flowing in the female body and she's more than ready to go into, intercourse and have sex and all that. To see that happen when women realize that that's how their body operates according to the hours of the day, it's just fantastic.
I mean, this is so fascinating. I'm sure some people are getting their minds blown right now because no one's talking about this on a mainstream level. A lot of men are being repressed in machismo, learning about sexual nihilism through the fake porn, and then women are actually trying to act like men and going to the
Yeah.
office and being conditioned that way. And this is what I see a lot in the polarity and tantra work. And something interesting, Bard, which I've heard you riff about it in Denmark, but in the community, right, in these entrepreneur coaching circles, the healing psychedelic circles, et cetera, especially in the hot spots like Bali, Copenhagen, LA, the various forms of, I'm sure this is the same in Ingsbaka and, Portugal. The women seem to be ahead, right? The women's circles, the women coaching women on how to unlock these orgasmic feminine states seems to be proliferating at an insane rate. Like I know more female coaches in my circle who are in the 7-figure range than the men doing the masculine coaching that's, you know, similar. And I'm curious why that is, and why is the men's movement, although it's growing rapidly and it's amazing, and I know you're deeply involved with it, as am I, why is there so much resistance? It's like we have a drag as we try to accelerate. There's like a drag on it or something.
Very good question, to be honest. I think a lot of it has to do that men sort of take the reserved seat. They're being told by culture that they're predators.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we have a lot of guys who get sentenced for rape right now in Scandinavia. We have like bad numbers when it comes to rape, when it comes to, you know, but a lot of these guys are innocent. It's just that we have a form of radical feminism here that's gone completely overboard.
Mm.
And sometimes there's not even any technical evidence whatsoever. The guys get sentenced for rape and have years in jail and get their lives destroyed, right? Uh, when they clearly, you know, it was bad the other way. I must emphasize that. Like, if only 5 years ago, but the last 3 years after Me Too, I'd say it's gone the other way. And the guys are getting terrified of talking about their sexuality because their sexuality has become synonymous with being a predator.
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, the male heterosexuality is all about being the reason why a woman has pleasure. As if you can make a woman feel pleasure, that's the ultimate pleasure. In French, I love French. It's called jouissance, to enjoy something, right? But
Mm-hmm.
jouissance plus is to enjoy that somebody else enjoys your company even more than you enjoy yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That is fundamental to male heterosexuality. And that's why the guys are like, the program to sit and wait until the women have figured out what the women want. But in reality, what you want is always an interactive phenomenon. So
Mm-hmm.
women get frustrated because when the guys can't figure out what they want, there's no communication. So while the guys are sitting on the side, they become like the hen sitting and waiting for the cock. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
the other way around, like it was historically. And while they're waiting for the women to figure out what the women want, so the women should tell them. But this is the thing: a woman will never tell you what she wants.
Mm-hmm.
A woman wants you to figure out what she wants.
Of course.
It's called seduction.
That's the
It's
game.
supposed to be the most masculine thing of all. I mean, that's why I teach the guys, instead of thinking of meeting women and getting to fuck them, you know, and trying to figure out how that works, start dating women. Go to your grandfather or somebody who knew how to date. Learn how to date women. Enjoy the dating process. Enjoy the fact this woman's sitting opposite you, and she's quite thrilled about having sex with you. But right now, she's enjoying the moment as it is, over the dinner and over the drinks and over being listened to and over being paid attention to, and having a man who's actually fascinated with her and who brings something to the table that her sister will not bring, right? And who's a man, right? And go into that experience first and learn the art of seduction. Because if you learn the art of seduction right there, you've learned the art of how to make a woman enjoy her life more than you have to enjoy yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
your sort of your jouissance plus is activated, right? That's a good place to start. And then you can go, of course, into sexuality and how you're a really good lover for women, and how you discover actually the 7 different orgasms and what you could do as a man to help that happen. But that's a long, long journey you're
Sure.
on. Once you go into that mode, it's better, I think, to start for most guys just in the civilized discourse of meeting a woman and having chat with her
Right.
without just having a coffee and being best friends at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's not a
Right.
date.
Right.
That's not a date. That's friend zoning. That kills
Yeah.
you, right? The later in the day you meet a woman, the closer you are to seducing her.
Mm.
Having a drink with her an hour before midnight, good sign, right? That's why nightclubs work. That's why nightclubs are popular, because the later in the day you meet a woman, the more likely she is to find you sexually favorable. But it doesn't mean if you meet her at 7 o'clock in the evening, she will turn you down. It just means that the whole path of seduction all the way up to the orgasm is just so much longer, right?
Right. Yeah, this is brilliant stuff. And the shadow side of this I've seen is, of course, the pickup artist and those communities, the red pill men's kind of blog community space, which I definitely dove into earlier in my journey because I was trying to fucking figure this out. And again, this is when I'm hearing you speak, Bart, it's like, yep, yep, yep. These are bars. This is what men need to hear.
But the pickup artist thing is just okay. It's like women wear boxes to tick.
Right, right.
It's like you're competing with
So
your
dead.
brother over there. Like, how many women can you fuck in a certain time?
Yep.
And it's just, do you think you get any depth out of that? No.
Sad.
It's like you if you are successful, I'd say, if you're successful as a pickup artist, you have a certain number of pussies you fucked, right? But you fuck them each pussy, new pussy at a time. you're not going to become a great lover doing that.
No.
You're not going to go into in depth. You're going to stay totally superficial. You're going to become superficial as a man, as a lover,
Right.
and your journey never starts. It never kicks
Right.
off.
That's right. Because without intimacy and like the art of seduction and the process of it, which is its own psychedelic journey, when you actually go, and this is what Tantra teaches and all those traditions, is the slowness, just like, you can't go and learn the entire yoga sequence by just doing the one pose. Like it's a journey and a process. And this is where I think some of those folks got their mind really fucked, which is what it was bringing up for me, Bar, which you've spoken to a lot and you embodied at the European Men's Conference, was the lack of male mentors and male ritual elders. Because, like you
Yeah.
said, going to your grandfather or going to an uncle who knows how to date women. And we have a whole generation of boys and young men that missed out on that. And so that's why we have to recreate it now. And that's why things like men's work are just critical.
Yeah, and don't take your questions to the date. Don't ask a girl who's probably even younger than you what she wants. It's a total turnoff for women. It's the absolute opposite of seduction. No,
Mm,
no, no. You got to figure it out. I mean, if you take a girl out on a date, don't ask her which restaurant she wants to go to.
that's right.
Think like,
Yeah,
what restaurant would you like to go to? What restaurant would you like to take a woman like her to? Which
that's right.
restaurant? You can ask a woman at most, would you like our table at the restaurant to be more separated, so it's just you and me? Or would you actually like to be kind of the queen of the club, sit at the center of things and be in more social media? Because I'm happy with that too. You can ask a woman that. You can ask her, is this a date where we're more social and comfortable having other people around us? Or is this more, would you like to be alone just with me? Right? And a woman would love to answer that question. Then you figure out what kind of restaurant you go to. Then you book that
Mm,
restaurant. Then you pick up the bill. That's easy to do as a woman. But having that one little question, just like, I'm open to this, but where are you and I at right now? That's a question women would love to answer. Oh, where you and I are at. Okay, kind of here. What do you think? Oh, all right, right,
mhm,
right. And then you figure out where she's at. Like,
mm,
she might want to date you 3 times over again before you actually do the whole thing, right? But
mhm,
you're fine with that. And she doesn't want to be stressed about it. And certainly, you know, every time a woman really wants you to come during sex, ask yourself, does she really want me to come? Or has she just been told that she should ask a guy to come at this stage till we're done with, but she would love to go on for 3 more hours?
There it is.
Then surprise her. They say, oh,
Yep.
I'm not going to come. Why? Because I'm going to stay here with you for the next 3 hours. What? Really? Just wait for the shock in her face when you say that, right? That's when you
Huge.
begin to become a lover, when you get to
Mhm.
those
Yeah. Mm.
moments. Yeah.
This is the medicine of that lover archetype, which, healthy lover archetypes in pair bonds create healthy families and healthy villages. And this
Yeah.
is this is what we need desperately now, is men and women who are tantrically informed. Even a little bit of this practice will go a long way to
Yeah.
create this superconductor of intimacy that's also going to feed into your career. You're going to be more
Yeah.
successful in your career for sure. You're going to be a deeper thinker, and that's going to transmit to the children in the village, and that's
Yeah,
that's
and
what
and
we
and,
need.
and don't look for harmony and balance in the sexuality. This is the trick of nature. Like,
Mhm,
nature wants us to be sexual creatures for decades. Hmm? It wants men to be turned on by women, the other way around. And for gay couples, certainly you go with your own gender. Like, you want to be turned on, right? The way nature plays it beautifully is that you don't actually match with a woman. A woman comes to the experience with you as a man with certain fantasies, right? And you come with other fantasies than hers. Keep that, because it's precisely because you get so much out of the sexual encounter, and it's so fantastic, but you don't really get it.
mhm,
There's always something there you don't get. That's exactly why you return. That's what a great lover is. If you decide to discover a woman, for example, that you want to be a lover, you want to love her 1,000 times, it's because there's always something there that resists. There's
mhm,
always something there you don't get. You can get other things you never thought you'd have. There will certainly happen things you never thought you would experience, right?
yeah,
But there's always something there. I I've talked to a lot of men and women who've gone through tantric exercises, and I'm really really fascinated with the whole thing, right? Like, we have large groups of people, because then you see patterns, and I love patterns because
mhm,
I'm an archetypologist. That's what I do. I find people's archetypes. And what's funny is that men often say they look for sex and intimacy, and they look for sex, and women say they look for sex and love.
mm,
The funny thing is that intimacy and love are not the same thing. They're really not the same thing. When you ask women and men to define it, there's even more of a difference, right? And when you kind of describe intimacy the way guys talk about it in between themselves to women, women will go, "Oh, yuck. Oh, God, not really." It sounds a bit like, having a tit and having a baby sucking it or something. No, we don't do intimacy, right? And then you sit with a woman and talk about, and they said if they want sex and they want love and they want sex and they want love, and they say, okay, sex, I understand what that is. That is literally, anatomy. That's what it is fundamentally, right? And it has so many other fantastic qualities. That's what it is, right? So about the love thing then, because that's an abstraction. Oh, the love thing is very much, I should feel protected and provided for. Okay. Then I check with the guys. They're not really interested in connecting sex to protection and provision. Protection and provision, men are, they love to give protection and provision to a woman in general. Some men are even better at protection. Some men are better at provision. They're called warriors and hunters. It's the fundamental male archetypes, right? But when it comes to sexuality, it's not really there for men. And then when you tell it to women, it's just like what you describe as love is actually not what the guy brings to the table when he has sex with you. Really? Yeah. And then I just discovered that this is so funny. Like, it's all about the sex. It really literally is all about the sex. Women think it's about sex and love. Men think it's about sex and intimacy. It really is all about the sex. And that's why I always advise people who got to go through the whole thing of tantric. I had it last night. I had a beautiful couple. He's in his early 40s. She's like around 35. They love each other to bits. They have tons of fun. Both had kids in the past, and they want to do the tantric thing, right? And I said, okay, so you're gonna just race through tantra next year. You're a great couple. You're gonna get it. You're perfect for it. But please remember this one thing. You think you're looking for different things, but I advise you to only look for the sex and do it really well. Like sex is the fruit. Now squeeze all the juice you possibly could do out of it. That's the best way to do tantra, to learn tantra. Because when men are looking for the intimacy, suddenly one day you're going to discover that one of your partners gives you that, and she doesn't even know it.
Right.
And as a woman, one day you're going to discover that one of your partners, one of your favorite lovers, suddenly gives you love, and he doesn't know it. That's your partner. That right there, that's the man or the woman of your life. But why not start with the sex? Go pure sex. And that's what tantric sexologists like you, tantra teachers, teach people. They teach them, this is how it works.
It's at the core. I mean, you can't deny nature. And so let's focus on step one before we jump to protection, provision, and all these other things.
Exactly. Or before you love to the shoes or whatever you expect him to provide for you, right? It's called Asha in ancient Persian. It's exactly the same word as Dao in Chinese. How things work. Yeah. Do the Dao of sex. Do the Asha of sex first. That I would advise people to do when they approach Tantra. It's a very good place to start. And it's also when men and women meet because, hey, your bodies are meant to fuck each other. That's quite obvious, right? So
that's nature's intention.
Yep, it is.
So Bart, this conversation is amazing. I can't wait to see you later this year in Europe. And for people that want to, learn more about your work, maybe read your books, where do you hang out these days?
My latest two books, one is called Synthism. The other one, which could be really interesting, is called Digital Libido. And it's really about libido versus motido. I mean, libido, what is you that wants to live? Your horniness, essentially, right? And motido, the death drive. And where are they at in contemporary society? We talk about men, women, tribal, androgynous, shamanic. It's a lot of archetypology. So Digital Libido is I think, the book I would recommend for the guys who follow your podcast. And that's also with your work and my work tied together quite nicely.
Brilliant. Well, Alexander, it's been a pleasure, and I learned a lot. This has been fucking amazing. As always, you are a liminal archetypologist that I love to converse with, and I wish you a good evening, sir. I'll see you very soon.
Same to you. Big love.
Big love, brother.